Your memories of that night must be very clear.
They are indeed.
Can you tell us something about what happened?
Well, you know quite well what happened. The ship struck an iceberg, and I, like all 7-year-old children, of course, was in bed and asleep. But my mother wakened me, and my father went with my mother, and took me and placed me in a lifeboat, and my mother, and made no attempt to get in herself.
March 31st, 1911. A day when ambition transformed into awe-inspiring reality. At Harland & Wolff's Belfast shipyard, more than 100,000 spectators gathered to witness history. Towering before them stood a leviathan of steel, over 52,000 tons of iron, innovation, and human will. Then, with a thunderous crack and a rush of seawater, the hydraulic triggers gave way. Titanic's massive hull surged down the slipway, meeting the sea for the very first time. This wasn't merely the launch of a ship, it was the birth of a legend. On April 10, 1912, the RMS Titanic departed from Southampton on her maiden voyage, hailed as the crown jewel of Edwardian engineering and elegance. Weighing over 52,000 tons and stretching nearly 226 meters in length, she was the largest moving object ever built at that time, a floating palace of steel, opulence, and ambition. Dubbed unsinkable, she embodied humanity's unshakable faith in progress. But just 4 days into her journey, beneath a moonless sky in the frigid North Atlantic, that illusion would be shattered when nature struck without warning. On the night of April 14, 1912, beneath a moonless sky and calm Atlantic waters, the Titanic steamed ahead at nearly full speed, unaware of the silent danger lying just ahead. At 11:40 p.m., a massive iceberg loomed into view. First Officer William Murdoch ordered the helm hard a starboard and the engines full astern in a desperate attempt to avoid it. But the turn came too late. Titanic scraped along the iceberg's submerged edge, tearing a jagged wound along her starboard hull and rupturing 6 of her forward watertight compartments. Titanic had been engineered with 16 watertight compartments and was designed to stay afloat with any 2 flooded, or even the first 4. But the bulkhead separating them rose only a few feet above the waterline, allowing seawater to spill over like an overflowing ice tray. As the bow dipped lower, each compartment flooded the next. The ship's revolutionary design, once hailed as state-of-the-art, had become her undoing. The Titanic was doomed. Yet more than a century later, the mystery of the Titanic continues to captivate historians, engineers, and the public alike. Since the wreck's discovery on September 1, 1985, numerous expeditions have explored the ocean floor, seeking to uncover the truth of what really happened that fateful night. Researchers have meticulously analyzed the wreckage, examined historical blueprints and testimonies, and reviewed survivor accounts to reconstruct the final hours. Among the most iconic artifacts recovered is the Big Piece, a 15-ton section of the starboard hull, raised in 1998 and now displayed at the Titanic Artifact Exhibition in Las Vegas. These investigations, combined with decades of study, have revealed startling insights. New evidence has pointed to critical design flaws that weaken Titanic's structural integrity, flaws that may have played a devastating role in her rapid sinking. Behind the creation of the Titanic and her sister ship Olympic stood 2 powerful organizations, the White Star Line and Harland & Wolff Shipyard, each led by visionary minds. At the helm of White Star Line was J. Bruce Ismay, the company's chairman, who spearheaded the idea of a new class of luxury liners that emphasized size and comfort over speed. He partnered with Lord William Peary, chairman of Harland & Wolff, who fully embraced the vision and committed his shipyard to the challenge. The early design was overseen by Alexander Carlisle, Harland & Wolff's chief draftsman, who proposed advanced safety features such as extra lifeboats and modern davits. After Carlisle's resignation in 1910, his duties were taken over by Thomas Andrews, a gifted naval architect and Lord Peary's nephew, who became the driving force behind Titanic's interior layout, structural refinement, and day-to-day oversight during construction. Supporting him was Edward Wilding, a brilliant technical mind responsible for crucial calculations on buoyancy, flooding scenarios, and the ship's structural integrity. To power such a massive vessel, Robert Falconer Keith, Harland & Wolff's senior engine designer, developed and refined the engineering systems that would house the ship's massive steam turbines and triple expansion engines. Overseeing the actual installation and management of these systems was Joseph Bell, Titanic's chief engineer, who ensured every mechanical component met performance standards. On the ground, John Kempster, Harland & Wolff's managing director of construction, coordinated the shipyard's vast workforce, turning plans into steel and timber. Together, this remarkable team of designers, engineers, and decision-makers brought the Olympic-class liners to life, pushing the boundaries of maritime engineering, though history would ultimately challenge the strength of their creation. One of the Titanic's most critical vulnerabilities lay hidden in her very framework, the rivets and hull plating. Investigations after the sinking revealed that many of the rivets used in her forward sections were made of substandard wrought iron, prone to brittleness in freezing temperatures. When the iceberg struck, these rivets are believed to have popped under pressure, causing the steel plates to separate and creating a jagged, continuous breach below the waterline. Compounding the issue were her watertight bulkheads, a design once hailed as revolutionary. While these vertical walls could seal off individual compartments to prevent flooding, they did not extend high enough to completely contain rising water. As water poured into the first 6 compartments, it simply spilled over the tops of the bulkheads, one by one like a series of doomed dominoes. Making matters worse was the presence of open longitudinal gaps, uninterrupted spaces running the length of the lower decks. While efficient for passenger and cargo movement, they allowed water to surge forward unchecked once the forward compartments were compromised. A further oversight was the lack of a double hull along the entire length of the ship. Though Titanic had a double bottom, she lacked a protective outer layer along her sides. Had a full double hull been implemented, the glancing blow from the iceberg might not have pierced her inner skin. Above the waterline, the situation was no better. Despite being designed to carry over 2,200 people, Titanic had only 20 lifeboats, enough for just about 1,178, barely half of those on board. This was not a failure of space, but a failure of regulation and misplaced faith in the ship's unsinkable status. Alexander Carlisle, Harland & Wolff's chief designer and managing director during the early design phase, originally proposed 64 lifeboats, enough for everyone. He even redesigned the davits to support this expanded number, a concept that would later resemble what was used on her sister ship, HMHS Britannic. However, Lord Pierian White Star deemed it excessive, reducing the number first to 32, then ultimately to 20 to preserve deck aesthetics and passenger space. Furious over the rejection of his safety recommendations, Carlisle, after nearly 40 years with the company, resigned from Harland & Wolff and never returned. In September 1911, a collision in the Solent quietly set off a chain of events that would alter maritime history. The RMS Olympic, Titanic's older sister ship, and the pride of the White Star Line, had entered service just months earlier. On September 20th, while navigating the narrow channel near the Isle of Wight, Olympic, under the command of Captain Edward John Smith, who had already been chosen to captain the Titanic on her maiden voyage, collided with the British Royal Navy cruiser HMS Hawke. The two ships were traveling side by side at moderate speed, but Olympic's powerful displacement created a strong suction current that pulled Hawke into her aft starboard side. The warship's ram-like bow tore into Olympic's hull just above and below the waterline, damaging 2 watertight compartments and bending one of her propeller shafts. Though Olympic remained afloat and managed to return to port under her own power, the damage was extensive. However, things weren't over yet. The incident triggered a lengthy investigation and a legal dispute between the Royal Navy and the White Star Line. Though White Star insisted Hawke was at fault, the court ultimately blamed Olympic, citing that her large displacement created the suction responsible for the collision. To repair the RMS Olympic, she was taken out of service for nearly 2 months. Harland and Wolff, the only shipyard capable of handling a vessel of her size, had to divert critical resources to complete the job. As a result, Titanic's final outfitting was delayed, and materials as well as skilled labor originally assigned to her were temporarily redirected to Olympic. This setback quietly shifted Titanic's timeline, setting the stage for the tragedy to come. As a result of this unfortunate mishap, Titanic's maiden voyage was delayed from March to April 10, 1912, just long enough for her to cross paths with the iceberg that would ultimately seal her fate. While it's impossible to say with certainty what would have happened had Titanic sailed on schedule, the Olympic-Hawke collision remains one of the many small events that, when aligned, culminated in the greatest maritime tragedy of the 20th century, a quiet collision between two ships in peacetime, yet it may have helped decide the destiny of over 1,500 souls. On March 30th, 1912, another troubling issue emerged. Deep within Titanic's coal bunkers, a fire had broken out, a blaze that would continue to smolder for more than a week before the ship left Southampton. While coal fires weren't unusual on steamships, this one was dangerously close to a bulkhead on the starboard side. Firemen worked tirelessly to control it, but it was never fully extinguished before departure. Some experts later argued that the intense heat may have compromised the strength of the steel in that section. Newly analyzed photographs show a dark vertical streak on the hull, possibly evidence of fire damage, visible before the voyage even began. There is also speculation that White Star Line officials downplayed the fire's severity to avoid delaying the ship's highly anticipated maiden voyage. In fact, Titanic was reportedly backed into her berth at Southampton, possibly to conceal the scorched area from passengers and the press. While not the direct cause of the sinking, the coal fire may have quietly contributed to the scale of the disaster that followed. Adding to the tragedy was a cascade of human missteps. A last-minute officer reshuffle led to the key for the lookout's binocular locker being misplaced, leaving Titanic's watchmen to scan the dark Atlantic with only their eyes. Many crew members, particularly those assigned to the deck, were unfamiliar with the ship's complex lifeboat systems. With little to no training or coordinated drills, confusion reigned during the critical final hours. Titanic carried only 20 lifeboats, barely enough for half of those on board, and even these weren't filled to their maximum capacity of 65 people each. Thomas Andrews, the ship's devoted designer, worked tirelessly to help others until the very end. Captain Edward John Smith, First Officer William Murdoch, Chief Officer Henry Wild, and Sixth Officer James Moody all perished at their posts. Bruce Ismay, chairman of the White Star Line, survived, only to be vilified as a coward by the press. The most senior officer to survive was Second Officer Charles Lightoller, who would later testify in both British and American inquiries. Among the Titanic's passengers were some of the most prominent figures of the era. John Jacob Astor IV, one of the richest men aboard, perished after helping his pregnant wife into a lifeboat. Benjamin Guggenheim met his end dressed in formal wear, declaring he was prepared to go down like a gentleman. Isidore and Ida Strauss, co-owners of Macy's, chose to die together rather than be separated. Meanwhile, Margaret Molly Brown survived and famously urged her lifeboat to return to the debris field to rescue more souls. The disaster sent shockwaves across the globe, prompting sweeping reforms in maritime safety, mandatory lifeboats for all aboard, continuous radio watch, and the creation of the International Ice Patrol. Over time, the Titanic became more than just a sunken ship. It became a symbol of human ambition, error, and remembrance. Its story inspired generations, from the poignant 1958 film A Night to Remember to James Cameron's 1997 epic, Titanic. And one haunting question still echoes through history. What if Alexander Carlisle's original proposal for 48 lifeboats and modern davits had been accepted? Before being dismissed by Lord Peary, every soul aboard might have survived. The Titanic would not be remembered as a tragedy, but as the ship that defied disaster. But history, as it often does, chose a darker course. Even now, more than a century later, expeditions continue to explore Titanic's rusting remains, lying over 12,500 feet beneath the North Atlantic. Each dive reveals new insights into her final hours, preserving the memory of what was lost. The 1,500 souls who perished that night are not forgotten. Their stories still echo in history, honored by generations who continue to seek the truth beneath the waves. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into one of history's greatest ships, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about the engineering marvels that shaped our world. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.